Today, we'll be figuring out how to produce a hit song like Apple by Charli XCX as someone with pretty little knowledge. Hello music makers, my name is Darling Katrina. I'm a music production beginner and did I learn some life-changing production techniques in this one. Unfortunately, my new Mac did not record the desktop, which means I can't show you what I did in real time. However, I can lead you through everything I did and all the discoveries I made. Now, in preparation for this video, I watched 2 tutorials this time, both of which I will link in the description below. Also, the workflow for this video is gonna be a little different than the videos I did before. You'll see. Now let me show you how I went from this to this. So what I did today was I recreated the whole beat as I saw it in the videos, and then I deleted all the takes. I just left the blank tracks so that I had everything with the right plugins and just had to redo all the parts so that I could make it my own song. I'm starting with the beat. So it's a simple, very simple beat. The kick is on the first through the fourth beat, the snare is on the second and fourth beat, and the hi-hat on the offbeat fourths. Dry sounds like this. And what I noticed is that the kick was sounding pretty round. I used equalizer and compression, and I also used a noise gate with a sidechain to the snare so that every time the snare plays, the kick plays a little bit lighter. And I also used EQ on snare and equalizer and a de-esser on the hi-hat so that they don't sound too harsh. All in all, it sounds like this. So there's a slight difference between the dry one and the one with the plugins. Also, and here is the first discovery I made today, you can use a track stack, so you can stack different tracks together. So for example, if you want to have these 3 be aligned, you can create a track stack right here, and that's what I did. And then I used another compressor and another equalizer on those. You can see those also here. This is the same thing as here, just to have it sound pretty tight and pretty compact. So here's it without the second compressor and the second equalizer. And now with. Just sounds better. Okay, so that is the beat. So for the synthesizers, I used 2 different synths. It's a stabby synth sound. And I added some compression, I added some chorus and equalizer, as well as the delay, which is a free plugin. I love it, I use a lot of it. It's from 6 Sample, you can just download it, it's pretty cool. And I have a doubled synth here so that the delay is detached from the dry synthesizer. And this is the reverb or the delay. And with all the plugins, it sounds like this. And again, I used a compressor and an equalizer on top of all of these in the track stack. I just think it sounds a lot more tight, and that's what you need. So for the synth bass, I tried to stay pretty close to the tutorial that I saw. I wanted it to be very short notes, very jumpy notes. Again, I used 2 different basses for the same melody, which are panned out on both ears. Right. And then I also used a fuzzy bass on top of those just to add a booming sound to the sub bass part of the bass line. And this is what it sounds like all together dry. Now let's add all the different plugins. Again, I used delay, I used a compressor, I used some EQ, also some sub bass plugin just to have the bass be more intense. On the fuzzy bass, I also used like the monster plugin, whatever that is. I think it came with the with the pre-save plugin. So all in all, it sounds like this. And then again, I used compressor and EQ on the track stack. It just sounds so much tighter in my ears. Let's get to the second discovery. So if you listen to the original, you can hear that in the background there is some vocal chops, which are just the same note over and over again. It's like an ah sound, and I wanted to recreate that, but I had no idea how. So I played around with all the different plugins that I could think of and that I found. All in all, I just sang one note, and I wanted to make it topped up. I wanted to have it reverby. I wanted to have it like in a cool rhythm, and I did so with the remix FX, and it just changed everything. I think I'm using this from now on. So let's listen to the dry vocal chop, which is just one long R. I put on some pitch correction. I also put on some de-essing just to have it be less harsh. Already much better. I also used compression and equalizer, which makes it a little airier. If you add the FX, which I used this one right here, I didn't know what it did, but it just chops up the dry vocal. The second one is just a filter, which just adds a little bit of resonance, so it sounds like this. And then I also added a chorus and a really cool plugin that I did not know was free. It's a Valhalla Super Massive, as much as I know. It's one of the main plugins that Phineas uses, Billie Eilish's brother, on all of her vocals. I always wanted to try it, but it's pretty expensive. But they do have the Super Massive and also the Space Modulator, and they are both free to download, and they're pretty cool. So this is what it sounds like. So you don't even notice that I was pretty off pitch and my vocals were pretty raw. That's basically the production that I took out of the tutorials. Let's listen to the full thing. So now that I remade the original song using the tutorials, using compression, using equalizer, etc., I copied the whole thing, I deleted all of these tracks, and I started from scratch building my own song. It is very heavily inspired obviously by Apple, but it does sound like a new song. I did edit the beat a little bit in the later part of the song. I also added a second snare just to have it a little bit different and a little bit more energetic. This is what it sounds in the later part of the song. I changed the synth pretty heavily. I left the steps. I did move them around a little bit. I did move the chords around, but it's pretty much the same thing. I also added a marimba just for giggles. I think it sounds pretty cool. It obviously builds up throughout the song, but this is what it sounds like with all of the effects on it and the new parts that I came up with. So as you can hear, pretty similar, but also at the same time different. Maybe a little more delay on some parts. This is the main delay that I used. I used it pretty much for all of the synthesizers, but I did play around with the knobs a little bit to make it fit better and to make it sound better. Probably all there is to the synthesizers. I did keep them pretty much in the background just because I didn't like it when it was too much like in front of everything else. So for the synthesizers. Then there is obviously the bass. I did keep the bass line pretty snappy, pretty jumpy, but I did change a little bit of it. I also kept the very same instruments, but I did, as I said, change the bass line. Also, maybe I played around with the settings for the individual effects and plugins a little bit, but pretty much stayed the same. Still snappy, still jumpy, but it is a different bass line so that it fit together with the synthesizers. Something I added, which was not in the original, maybe I just forgot, is a top line. I used the bass again. I think it's the same, yeah, it's the same bass, but it's higher notes, counter melodies somewhat to the bass line. I doubled it with a Gamis organ, whatever that is. It just sounds pretty cool. Kept it in the back, but it is there. Just adds to the whole track. Yeah, I did keep some of the original plugins like the Flanger. These are all plugins that I do not know how to use. I do not know what they do, but they sound cool, so I just kept them for now. Maybe I will figure out what they are. There's also an overdrive and the delay again, obviously. Maybe we should listen to it dry. Let's listen to it dry. It adds to the whole song, but also it counters the melody of the bass or the bass line. And a last thing that I did is I did leave the vocal chops because I love them. I did keep them as they were, but I found out something pretty cool, which is that you can, I mean, I never knew this existed, but it's amazing. I use it a lot now. You can transpose individual parts of a vocal line or of an audio track. So for example, if you look up here, this is the normal vocal. Yeah, and then there is a part that I singled out and I transposed it, so there is somewhat of a melody in the vocal chops. sounds pretty cool. Did not know you can do it, know now, and love it. Yeah, can't complain. Sounds amazing. Another thing I did for the vocal chops is in the automation segment, which is right here. You can automate obviously the volume. You can automate the pan, so where the sound is within your headphones or your speakers. Let's say you want to change the automation. You want to change some of the settings for a part. Right here, you can change from read to latch. And what it does is, if I play the track at a certain point, and if I have latch activated, I can turn the knob while I play the song, and it memorizes which pan was set. So I'll show you. I'll just show you. So as you can see, it did all these individual notes that I would have had to insert manually, automatically, depending on where I turned the knob. So now that when I play it back, it has the same thing that I just did. Yeah, and another thing I did with the automation is at the beginning of the song, the gate, they're usually in a 1/16th, and I automated them so that it changes the speed at which the vocal chops are edited. And it sounds pretty cool in the beginning. So once I was finished, I played the whole thing back and it sounded pretty cool, although I did feel like there wasn't enough oomph, like there wasn't enough power behind individual parts. As I did before, I used the track stack, bass, effects, whatever. For individual tracks, you have the effects here, and then you can do other effects on top of those, which are just everything that is below this has the same effects on top of the ones that they have individually. On top of those, you can also add some to the whole track, which I did, and then it sounded much fuller. I added some compression. I added 2 equalizers on top of each other, which I heard you have to do, or you should do, if you want the equalization or the equalizing to sound more natural. And I also, again, added some Valhalla space modulator, just because I thought it sounded cool. So let's listen to it from the beginning. I will turn on the effects on all of the buses in the middle of it, just so you can see what I mean if I say that it has more oomph. It has more power, it has more, I don't know how to call it, but it has more of it, and I wanted more. So yeah, this is the song. I hope you understood what I mean. It is louder, obviously, but it just has more bass, maybe? Gets you up and dancing. If you're interested in any of the individual effects, please let me know. I can show you in more detail next time. So I love how this turned out. Also, everything I learned while making that song today, the automation stuff, the vocal chops, and also the stack buses, the buses on the track stacks. All of this is super basic stuff, but it is crucial. I had to learn it at some point, and everyone has to start somewhere. If you enjoyed this video and want to join me as I figure out even more of these production basics, please like, please subscribe, and if there's a specific song that you would like me to produce, you can leave it in the comments. Also, look at my hair. It's so pretty. Okay, that's it. Bye.